In less than 30 years, most people will be living in cities. They want jobs, homes, clean water, and more. But cities are struggling. They don't meet people's needs. So they have to expand their infrastructure, but nature suffers in the process. That's exactly what's happening with the Philippines' mega projects. And that's why it's very important to strike a balance between nature and urban development. Urban development is a big deal in the current century, yet cities all over the world are facing problems. To provide more electricity, fossil fuels have to be burned. To provide better roads, forests need to be cut down. Providing public transport requires tunnels to be bored and routes to be cut. Urban growth depends on hurting nature, which causes problems like droughts, floods, and health crises. Over 70% of big cities are at high risk for environmental harm. Almost 60% face natural dangers like floods and earthquakes. And to add on top of that, these sorts of urban expansions hurt the natural beauty of the place. The Philippines is a beautiful country, and a good portion of its earnings comes from the tourism industry, an industry that depends on the beauty of the natural environment. Their revenue peaked in 2019, where they earned a staggering USD 9.3 billion from tourism. And by September of 2023, they earned $5.5 billion from tourists. These guys mainly came from South Korea, Japan, and the US. If the place isn't pretty, then you can bet that tourism is going to go into decline. But the Philippines desperately needs infrastructure to increase its economic growth. Infrastructure is the skeleton of a city, but when we build in the wrong places or plan poorly, it hurts nature and us. Some areas are too fragile for big projects, like pristine areas in Alaska or special rivers. Even places hit by climate change need care. We need smart, well-placed infrastructure that keeps our progress while protecting nature and our lives. If we don't, then the loss of nature can result in significant downsides for us. Cities are at risk of collectively losing $31 trillion from nature loss. A balance needs to be met where we can expand our infrastructure while keeping nature all tidy. But let's take a deeper look into why something as simple as public transport and electricity is so important. The world population in 1972 was around 3.8 billion people. Today, we are more than twice that at 7.8 billion, and by 2050, we may have reached 9.9 billion. Cities are home to more than half of us. Another 2.5 billion people might be living in cities by 2050, with Asia and Africa seeing the largest expansion. Transportation is much more than just traveling from one location to another. It links individuals to jobs, education, and healthcare, among other things. It also increases international trade. Rural roads, for example, may save lives by connecting people to healthcare, allowing more girls to attend school, and allowing farmers to sell their products in marketplaces. The Philippines is struggling greatly with its road infrastructure problems. For example, it takes about 5 minutes to drive 1 kilometer in Metro Manila. The same goes for the Philippines' electricity. Electricity is very important for the economic growth of a country, yet the Philippines has unreliable and expensive electricity. It's obvious that not having reliable electricity can hurt businesses and commercial activities. For example, a study took a look at Pakistan, another country that suffers from power issues, and they found some interesting facts. They found that firms were about 33% to 39% less profitable in periods where there was a shortage of electricity. The same thing applies to the Philippines. But electricity is crazy expensive there. As of October of 2023, it costs about $0.21 per kilowatt hour, making it one of the most expensive places for electricity in Southeast Asia. This is partially down to their geography, making it difficult to provide electricity in some places. The Philippine government wants to solve these issues, so making a big push towards improving their infrastructure. This was started in 2017 with the Build, Build, Build project. They're heavily investing in huge projects that will solve their transportation, energy, and water issues. So when these are complete, expect the average Filipino citizen to have better transport, electricity, water, and internet services. Farmers can bring their crops to the market easily once rural roads are improved. Businesses will have to spend less money, investment will become more attractive, and the productivity of the country will boost. But there's a downside to all of this. All of these projects are not so environmentally friendly. Before we move on though, if you're enjoying the video so far, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. Now, let's talk about some of the issues that these projects bring. When there's no reliable transport, many cities turn towards informal ones, like the jeepneys in Manila. They're not very safe or consistent, but they're still used. This sort of problem is on the radar of the Filipino government, so they invest in huge public transport projects like the Metro Manila subway project. The benefit of the MMSP is that it'll cut down commutes significantly. For example, currently, it takes 1 hour and 10 minutes to go from Quezon City to Ninoy Aquino International Airport. But the MMSP will cut that down to only 35 minutes. It will reduce traffic congestion and over 1 million people will use it daily. But there are some environmental concerns about this project too. Trees have to be cleared and converted into construction yards. Fewer trees mean less carbon dioxide is consumed by them. And it's important to pay attention to carbon emissions, because 23% of the world's carbon emissions are all due to transportation. This also puts the place at risk of floods and ruins the area for the animals living there. Replacing a pretty forest with a construction yard is definitely going to make the place look ugly. On the bright side though, they reason that the reduction in carbon emissions from the subway's use may outweigh some of these downsides. So if people use public transport instead of private, this subway will have done its job. Let's take a look at another example, the Kaliwa Dam project. The goal of this dam is to provide water for tens of thousands of homes in Manila. But people aren't happy about this project. While the intentions are good, it threatens the livelihood of many indigenous people. These people rely on the nearby forests for hunting, honey harvesting, medicine and firewood. Huge dams like this can even cause earthquakes. They call this reservoir-induced seismicity. This happens because the dam is built on a fault line. The Kaliwa Dam, specifically, is built on the Philippine Fault Zone. High water pressure near a reservoir can cause movements in the fault line, so you end up with earthquakes. Large dams can also split up habitats and break up the flow of water. So, there can be many downsides to expanding the infrastructure of a country. But there are solutions to these kinds of issues. Humans can expand while not hurting nature. Take New Clark City, for instance. 60% of its land is open spaces. That's roughly 6,000 hectares. A good chunk will stay as green areas for farming and forests. The city will have walkable parts and better transport. You won't need cars as much, so there will be less pollution. The Asian Development Bank ensures nature is preserved here. They're studying biodiversity and water. The Kut-Kut River has its own 1.4-kilometer river park corridor, made to match its natural path. New Clark City is special because it's not just green, it's also strong. The government is ready for big disasters. If the capital is hit, the nation won't stop. This city has smart buildings, eco-friendly transport and green spaces. The roads will have walkways, bike lanes and automated transport. Public utilities will use greener energy sources like solar power and less wasteful buildings. The aim is for 30% of New Clark City's power to come from renewables by 2030. They're keeping nature intact in the city, like the river and trees. For the Kaliwa Dam, organizations suggested some better ways to get water. They looked at options that are less harmful to the environment and people, such as rainwater harvesting. It's cost-effective and can prevent flooding while providing water during dry times. They also suggested fixing water systems to stop leaks and reusing wastewater. As for the Metro Manila subway project, they plan to plant trees to replace the ones removed during site clearing. For each tree gone, they'll plant 100 seedlings elsewhere. Sounds great, doesn't it? Let us know in the comments what you think of these solutions. Leave a like, Subscribe for more, share with your friends, and be sure to check out these videos on screen.